Hello, everybody. Today, the podcast that's a little bit woo, a little bit wee, a little bit whoosh. It's a geezer. It's the Radiator Arms. All right, now today's episode is dedicated entirely to what I think we can safely call most people's favourite car show. It's Top Gear, by which I don't mean the silly American and other imitations of it. Did they try an Australian one as well?
Yeah, they did.
They did, didn't
They had
they?
one of the guys from Mighty Car Mods on it. It was Moog, wasn't it?
Moog, yeah. Actually, I do like Mighty Car Mods, so you know what? I haven't actually seen Australian Top Gear, so I'm not going to bash it.
Episode. Didn't mind it. I thought it was all right. You know, if you treat it as this isn't the original trio and it's just a bit of fun on a car show, it's all right.
Did they not do an earlier one, though? Because I seem to distinctly remember in an episode them bringing the presenters of Australian Top Gear to the test track in a prison van.
Yes, they did. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they did. Yes, I do remember that.
Right, now I'm getting uncomfortable because we're already on topic, so I think I need to veer the ship away for it a little bit before we then, resume course. Gentlemen, I need to have a bit of a rant.
Here we go. This will be the next 25 minutes gone.
Okay,
Oh,
right.
God.
Now, in order to enable this podcast to happen, because we've had a couple of issues over the last few weeks, so we're a little bit behind, but we want to make sure that the good people either listening to us or watching, hello everybody, to myself, that's James, aka JayEmm, to Will, aka Will the Plank.
Hello.
And of course, the magnificent Ant.
And that would be me from SportzNTouring. And one of the issues was actually that I threw my back out and I couldn't drive anywhere for about a week. So that's why we're a little bit behind schedule. So
That's
our
fine.
hands up for that.
How is your case of old bastard doing?
Well, it's a little more bastard than it is old at the moment, but we're getting there.
You'll fight through.
I had to drive very slowly over the speed bumps this morning not to upset him.
Yes.
To be fair, that's not unusual. So, yeah, the Radiator Arms Support Golf, which you were filming with
Yes.
earlier this week and have done some work
I
too.
was.
So if you want to see that, make sure you subscribe to JayEmm and Friends. Anyway, in order to enable this, I did a bit of jiggery-pokery. The last couple of weeks, I've had a press car from BMW. And as this was my first ever press car from them, they asked me to collect it. Now, BMW HQ is down in Farnborough. And that is effectively the opposite side of the M25 from where I live in East Anglia. It's about 125 miles away. And it's one of those journeys that if the roads are clear and nice and everything, it's pretty easy. But if they're not, it's horrific. It could easily be a 4 to 5 hour journey if it goes properly wrong. So I decided to make sure that we could do today, and not to leave anything to chance, to drive there at night, drop the car off and pick up the Celica, come home. Simple plan. Until car dropped off, I'm headed back on the road. So getting down there, flawless. No issues whatsoever. As I'm coming back, it says M25 closed junction 15 to 16.
Oh, gosh.
Okay. Google Maps doesn't really seem to think that it is, but the sign is pretty certain that it is. Okay, the alternative would be to then go south and the other way around to the M25, which is a bit longer for me, but the sign said M25 junction's closed 5 to 6. So that way is closed as well. Okay. So I go onto the M25 going clockwise, the normal route going north, and lo and behold, junction 15 as promised, which is where the M4 joins. That is on the west side of London, for those who don't know their M25 geography. It is shut. They're diverting. And I say, right, to get back to where you want to go, follow the little black square on the yellow patch. Only none of the signs have the little black square on them. It's okay. This is fine. I know how to get home. Now, I don't have a particular problem with roadworks, especially ones done at night, and I know that we need to upgrade our road network, improve things, and I dislike people that get really, really annoyed about potholes and then get even more annoyed about the roadworks that are there to fix the potholes, okay? So I don't mind that. Nor do I mind things like the ULEZ charge, because, our capital does have a problem with air pollution. We need to improve air quality for our citizens, our children, so on and so forth. I don't have a particular problem with this. What I do have a problem with is roadworks on one of Britain's most important roads that have no signage to give you an alternative, that then force you into the ULEZ zone, because that's basically everything inside the M25. In my old Celica, I have to pay ULEZ, which I think is really £12.50 or so.
Something like that.
Yeah, £12.50 or £15. I can't remember which. ULEZ resets at midnight.
Oh, no.
So for the privilege of driving my car, which basically wasn't even stationary because I was driving through town at the middle of the night, I had to pay 25 quid just in ULEZ fees to get the car home last night because of the roadwork.
Oh, that was unlucky. Did it even use that much petrol, do you think?
No. But next time I do it, I'm going to decat it beforehand to get my money's worth.
Yes.
As a point of principle. This winds me up so much that it resets at midnight. Like, I would have been aggrieved about paying the £12.50 to drive through in the middle of the night anyway. To have to pay it twice because I was just there at exactly the wrong time, very, very frustrating.
Oh,
You do know what's going to happen now. In the comments, there's going to be a whole bunch of people complaining about who decided to do that and being completely factually incorrect about it. But anyway, let's not get into that.
No, but tell you something though. Was actually a little bit happy for my £25 because it meant that I drove down the M4 and past my old student accommodation.
Oh.
I lived in a building called Paragon, which I believe has now been knocked down, which is a bit of a surprise. But for those who do frequent this particular little journey, there's a couple of things you might know as landmarks. One is a big, tall building that says University of West London on the side of it. It wasn't called the University of West London when I went there. It was called TVU. And just after it is a big, fancy Audi dealership. That I actually watched being built from my flat window because I was on the 15th floor. So I must admit, gentlemen, a bit of confession time, I did go through there with a bit of a tear in my eye because I thought how life has changed. And, just over 15 years ago, I was in that flat on that 15th floor watching that Audi dealership being built, thinking, crikey, blimey, how the other half live, putting R8s and stuff in there. And, next week, Audi are dropping 2 of them off on my driveway because I've just asked them nicely. So,
That's
yeah.
very cool. That is very, very cool. And then that tear in your eye turned into a flood of tears.
Yeah,
when
but
you
that
saw
was
the £25 you had to pay for the ULEZ.
Yeah. That was also the hay fever as well, which I apologise if it flares up during this recording. It shouldn't do. I don't think it's too polleny in the recording studio.
Well, on the subject of Top Gear, I went on the internet and I found this.
I say.
Top Gearbox. Very, very cool website. It's got a full index of all of the episodes from Top Gear, who the guests were, what the main sort of feature was, what car was on there. So you can actually go back and look up each specific episode for a specific car on iPlayer, if you so happen to have a TV license.
Haven't they just stolen the Wikipedia article?
Probably, but it's still...
But made it more, it's possibly less convenient.
No, more convenient, I think.
Okay.
It's better. But anyway.
Was Harry Enfield the first guest?
Yes.
I
went back and I watched several old episodes because I figured I'd probably have more memories of the more recent ones.
Yeah.
And I went back and I watched the first few episodes across the first few seasons. Yeah.
But the big question is, did you start at season 2 where they introduced, was it James May or Richard Hammond? It was
James May.
Or did he go back to season 1 when it was Richard Dorr? Was that?
Jason
Dorr. That's what it was.
Dorr. Who on earth is he anyway?
Yeah.
People keep mistaking him for me. People are like, is this Jason Dorr? I'm like, he was probably as old as me 23 years ago.
Brilliant. Yeah. He was on a lot of Men and Motors stuff, wasn't he? In Granada and all those kind of things.
As was Hammond.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, Hammond did a lot of Men and Motors stuff. He did motorbike stuff on there as well.
I actually remember about a decade ago, I was looking on eBay for a BMW because that's what you do. And I'd been watching some of those kind of Granada Men and Motor stuff online. And I saw this car and I was like, that looks really familiar. And then I realised they were selling one of the cars that Richard Hammond had actually done a test on, which is quite interesting, on eBay. And I don't think they know. There was nothing mentioned about it on the eBay listing. And it was just happened to be one of the I think it was a 328 saloon or something like that. And so I thought that was quite interesting. Bit of a thing to find there.
So how did you find watching? Because I actually did it with my other half. I went back and watched the first episode of, let's call it, New Top Gear. And it's incredible, isn't it? Because you can see they've only got about 10 audience members that they're having to sort of shuffle and kind of move around so that the place looks a bit busy. Compare that to about 5-6 years later, the waiting list was years to get in there.
Yeah. No, I thought it was quite well put together. I mean, I'll be honest, the dynamic of just Clarkson and Hammond on their own, which was most of the episode, Jason Dorr only got involved in one of the features a little bit later on. It wasn't quite as good. You know, James did definitely bring a certain something to the dynamic between them. And I think they were all three quite different yet similar in some ways, people that can kind of bounce off each other, which sounds kind of familiar.
I was about to say, you must be our James May, because it's a bit like that when you went here.
Maybe.
I got the shirts though.
That is true. Who do you think out of the three of us? Who do you think is the Clarkson?
He's the Clarkson for sure. I think I'm more of the Hammond, because I'm the one who's like leans to the side every time I look at camera and try to look cool. I'm broken most of the time.
I have an amateur radio license and weaponized autism, so I'm definitely more the James May.
You can have that one. Yeah.
and I'm the musical one as well, so there you go.
Yeah, there you go. Although I do quite frequently miss the turning that I'm supposed to take, so...
Yeah. I actually did kind of enjoy those early episodes because they were a lot closer to the spirit of your original run Top Gear than you kind of remember. I think people have very, very selective memories when it comes to Top Gear because they think it was all brilliant and amazing and wonderful. The fact is, no television program that lasts for that long and has that many episodes is brilliant every single time. It's like Only Fools and Horses. Like, yes, a lot of it is really, really good. Some of it is absolutely spectacular. There were a few all right episodes and a couple of ones that have dated really, really badly. It's just that, whenever you turn on UK TV Gold, they are always playing heroes and villains, the Batman and Robin one. Like, it's for some reason that's the only one they bought a license to, so it's the only one you ever see, which is fine because it's amazing.
Speaking of licensing, fun fact that I learned some years back was that the old format Top Gear that ran, goodness, was it
from
80s?
The 70s?
70s, yeah. 70, late 70s, 76, 77.
Yeah.
I think it was from 77 to the late 90s. Apparently, by the time it got to the end, Clarkson had a share, if you like, of the rights for the show. And when they decided to bring it to an end, they sold the rights of the show to Channel 5, and that became Fifth Gear.
Correct.
So the old formats, which was more about car features, car reviews, rather than the kind of stuff that they did in the new format, that as a format was sold to Fifth Gear. And the only thing that they didn't sell them was the name. They said, we're going to keep the name and we have the right to use it as long as it's not in the same format and competing with what they sold to Fifth Gear. And then, of course, a couple of years later, they came out with the new format, Top Gear, but they were totally entitled to do it. And pretty much as soon as that happened, Fifth Gear took a dive.
And that's one of the reasons why you had things like the Star in a Reasonably Priced Car, the news section, various different things and particular formats, because they had to make sure that it was distinctive compared with what they'd sold off to Fifth Gear. Otherwise, they would open themselves up to some serious legal liability. I mean, this is a very, very interesting field in the world of IP, because most of the television shows that you know or watch, you don't realize it, but it will probably have originated somewhere else. There are companies like Endemol who specialize in doing, things like Big Brother, Love Island, Deal or No Deal, like most of the dance shows. Like, someone somewhere came up with the idea, came up with the format, it worked really, really well in one country, and then they just repackage it and sell it other places and go, hey, it's been a hit here, cool, let's do it here, So all of a sudden you've got Dancing with the Stars, that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Oh, and speaking of packaging, one of the countries that you didn't mention that I think they had a local Top Gear show for in the new format was, I think it was Korea. Was it Korea? And that famously there was like a helicopter crash with an Apache chasing a supercar of some description. Yeah. I'll look it up in a minute and see if I can find it and show you.
I didn't know that. But talk about old format Top Gear, the 70s through to 90s one. I used to love that as well. I don't know how much of that you watched when you were like growing up, James. And
quite a bit. I remember a few like episodes reasonably well, and every now and again there's an amazing one which actually features Mr. Willman, who in New Top Gear was generally referred to as the producers.
Yeah.
And then in the Grand Tour, he was referred to directly as Mr. Willman. He actually presented a feature on old school modified cars.
Yes, I
like
think I remember
the Dimmer 205, I think it was. You know, the cars where you're like, the car was 10 grand and they spent 30 grand on it for it to be worth about 8 grand. Like amazing, iconic, cool stuff, like real old-fashioned mod scene, which I quite enjoyed.
I loved a bit of William Willard, the Willarding.
Oh, yeah.
How he would like put his legs up. Was it on the wheels or the bumper or something like
Anywhere
that?
he could find
Anywhere
it,
he could. Close shot in the camera and put his wheels. And now this is the blah, 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 as his knees are by his ears.
Oh, yeah. No, I love that. I do engage in a bit of Willarding on
Yes.
occasion when things seem right. And are you fondling the Top Gear top trumps over there?
Yeah, I am. I brought my Top Gear top trumps along today. This is quite an old one.
Do we need a cool wall for the Radiator Arms studio?
Oh, you know what? That's not a terrible idea.
See, that's one of the other things as well. You forget there were lots and lots of things that they had in the sort of earlier seasons. They had a fire halfway through, didn't they? So the cool wall went.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the layout of the place changed. Different things changed. Now, I'll be honest, and gents, tell me if I'm right or wrong here. When I am rewatching the old episodes, I always skip the star in the reasonably priced car.
Yeah, that kind of bores me a little bit. It was kind of interesting perhaps at the time because maybe it was more relevant then to what was going on. But I don't know, it's something I'm not really that interested in unless I have a particular affinity for the person that is on TV, you know, the person that they're interviewing.
Yeah, and half the time they're just there because they've got something to sell. Like they've got there's a movie coming out that week with them or something like that. And it's like, yeah, it's the one bit of the program I can just do without. The Grand Tour was very much the same. And I think I do want to get this out of the way fairly early on, right? Although when you say Top Gear, for most people, it's Clarkson, Hammond, May era. There have been some horrendous episodes of that. But more importantly, there have been some brilliant episodes with both the later presenters and also in the Grand Tour. Two I want to mention in particular. I felt very sorry for Matt LeBlanc because I felt that he actually really did start to grow into the role of presenter quite well. And he really got on form and then left. But there was an episode that Harris, Flintoff and McGuinness did talking about their dad's cars.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? A lot of the episodes they do, it felt a little bit odd. The dynamic was a little bit weird, as it was in the early days, again, of, Clarkson, Hammond and May. But that episode, I think they dialed down the tomfoolery a little bit. You could see that they were all taking it a little bit more seriously, and it all meant something to them. And there was a real proper emotion in that episode, and I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Likewise, I consider if you were to make me write a list of, the 10 or maybe even 5 greatest episodes of Top Gear, I would have in there the Grand Tour episode, A Funeral for a Ford.
Oh, that was really good.
Yeah.
That particularly was of interest to me because it was the Mondeo, wasn't it?
Yeah, Mondeo features heavily.
Yeah, and because I had 2 Mondeos in my life, Mark 1 2-litre SI and the Mark 2 ST24. And yeah, that episode was quite cool. I kind of remember that. And yeah, it was nicely done.
Because it did what I think is the classic BBC thing, to educate, to inform, and to entertain, which is that it told you about what these things were, told you about their significance, their importance in a way that you would understand it if you weren't familiar with them, hadn't lived through the time, so on and so forth, gave you a bit of personal and interesting information about each of the presenters, their relationship with these particular cars and what each one meant to them. And I think also spoke to a lot of car people, particularly those of a certain vintage, on a very, very sort of fundamental level about, like, you know, I think, you know, especially maybe it's particularly for us men, and I will say that, that there is something about the car your dad drives.
Yes.
Isn't there? You know, because the car your dad drives says a lot about him, but it also says a lot about you,
Yes,
whether
it
you
does.
like it or not.
E28s, Ford Sierras, Mercedes W124s. Yeah, he just was living the rock star with the rock star cars, basically.
I found an old picture of me and my dad when I was younger, and I was trying to figure out what the car was in the background. Because generally speaking, he only ever bought Toyotas, but for some reason, this car looks a bit like a Ford Cortina. Yeah, I was quite surprised by that, because all I ever remember him owning was Toyota. And then we bought a Mini at one point, where we had a Mini and the liftback, the not Corolla liftback. But yeah, what also freaks me out a little bit is when you say growing up, because I was already working. In the big wide world, I was watching that stuff that you're talking about when you were growing up, and I was already grown up. About to get married, I think, at the time.
We were discussing this the other day. We were looking at the categories of things we can drive on our driving licenses.
Oh, yeah.
Because Ant has a lot of grandfather rights on his driving license. And the day you passed your test in September 91 or something like that, didn't you?
I did.
Which was only a few months after I was born.
Yes, I know. Thank you for reminding me yet again. I appreciate that, Will. But this is good. This is good.
How's the back again?
Yeah, well...
He watched all the original runs of the Willarding as they were coming out.
Yeah, he watched Top Gear in black and white.
He did.
Yeah. Actually, my mum always tells me that, like, as soon as she moved out of home and started earning her own money, the first thing she bought herself was a colour TV.
Oh.
Like, she's like, because, you know, growing up, like, you know, just telly was black and white.
Yeah.
I saw a documentary the other day about the Super Marionation, the Jerry Anderson stuff. And he talked about how frustrated he was that they made Stingray in colour. And if you remember Stingray, they make a big deal in the intro about the fact it's in colour. Yeah. He's like, and we didn't broadcast it in colour in Britain. Like, it was still broadcast in black and white. It's like, in America, they got it in colour, but they also didn't watch it. Like all the Super Marionation series, they all put American or American sounding people in it with a hope that it would then sell big in the States, and it never did, but I think it made it seem a bit more exotic here. So yeah, did you frequently watch old Top Gear then when it was on, or was it sort of just...
I remember Noel Edmonds.
Oh yeah.
I remember that.
I seem to recall, I might be wrong here, the first presenter of a Top Gear segment was Angela Rippon.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Angela Rippon, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, she's just sort of driving along the motorway type thing, and it's fascinating. There are some really cracking clips online, not just Top Gear, but of people driving back in the day.
Yeah.
And do you remember when COVID happened? A lot of people said to me, like, wow, it was like driving in my childhood, like being in my childhood, where they're like, the roads haven't been this quiet since like the 60s or 70s.
Yep.
And you go and watch clips. There's one that a driving instructor did of driving on, here's the new M1 motorway. And they're driving along, I think possibly even before there was a speed limit on it. And it's obviously shot on film with narrated afterwards. And you're like, it's dead. Yeah. Like it's like 4 o'clock in the morning dead, but at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a weekday, it's unbelievable.
I can tell you. So when I was growing up, we lived in this road in Brixton, and just off Cold Harbour Lane, and there was like, I don't know, there was probably enough space for twice as many cars to rock up all at once and still have parking on my road.
Yeah.
I went past then a few years ago now, and I went past that road and I thought, hang on a second, do you know what? Let me go and just take a little drive down memory lane. First of all, everything just looked a lot smaller than I remembered it. Mm-hmm. But secondly, the road was stacked with cars. There was just no gaps, nothing. I was like, either everyone's a lot richer or people are packed in tight. And I started to realize that all of the houses along that street that were once houses,
the flats.
They're all flats with like 2 or 3 separate doorbells on the front of it. And it was just like, oh my goodness, like how lucky were we to have the opportunity to live at that time?
I did a similar thing a few years ago. I drove by my childhood house. And yeah, it definitely looks a lot smaller than I remember it, but it is the same thing. Like cars are parked everywhere, not just on people's driveways, because it's one of those kind of cul-de-sacs that everybody had a drive back then. But even then, it's obviously now that it'll be the children and people like that in the families. Everybody has a car, so the streets are littered with them. And I was like, I remember as a young kid on my little go-kart, pedal go-kart going around, and I never really saw cars coming up. And now I feel like you'd be playing a game of Frogger.
Well, where I live is a little 1960s built bungalow, right? And it's the most stupid thing because no architect ever went even remotely close to that place. It's absolutely moronic. Everything about it is stupid in the way that it's designed, because it's on what's actually quite a large piece of land, and they've plonked it right in the middle of the piece of land. So you've got quite a generous sized garden at the front, quite a good sized garden at the back, but you can't really expand the house very easily without, interrupting anybody else or disturbing them or whatever. But it also has a garage and parking for what at the time would have been about, if you needed it, 6 cars. Okay, all in a straight line. But back then, it would have been unusual for a family to have 1 car. And yet they've given it all the facilities. One of the reasons I've stayed there for quite so long is because it's so difficult to find somewhere that's not a big house that has a lot of parking. So it's a very unique situation. Most places I look at, and I remember years and years ago when my parents separated, Mum was trying to find somewhere else for us to live. And she was looking at places. There was this one place I remember us looking at. It was a nice townhouse. It was like a 4-bedroom place in the middle of Bury St Edmunds, being built new. And at the time, both myself and my sister were still living at home. We were going to be for a few years. And she looked at it, and we didn't get it because it had, I think, 1 or maybe 2 parking spaces with it. That was it. And it wasn't a cheap place. It was like 400 or grand or something silly like that, which was a heck of a lot of money back then. We're talking like 2010 maybe.
Yeah.
And it's like, who the hell buys a £400,000 like 4-bedroom house and has 1 car?
Yeah.
Like, because, Dad will have a car. Mum will have a car. If one of the children is grown up, they'll probably have a car. Maybe Dad might have a motorbike or something fun for the weekend, or Mum might as well, whatever, who cares, right? But it's just like, the house builders started doing this thing where they're like building really, really big houses and then, giving it 1 parking space.
I mean, that is one of the reasons why I got the house that I have, because I can fit all in probably about 5 cars in total, roughly.
Don't tell Damani that.
Well, we have put it to the test a few times, but hey, listen, I've got 4 at the moment, so
yeah, that's true.
I kind of need it.
I have no allocated parking. I just have to street park.
Yeah, and but my neighbours. So I'm basically single, living in this house, but with like 4 cars. Although I only ever keep one of them at home at any one time. My neighbours are, nuclear family, mum and dad, plus 2 sons who've grown up, and our sons all grew up together, and now they've all got a car. The trouble is they've got about space for 2 cars, so they've had to convert their lawn into tarmac to fit an extra car in. Luckily, I don't need all of my space all the time, so I don't mind them just using it most of the time. Very rarely have to have a car there, but yeah, I mean, that's the challenge. Like, and these were houses that were built maybe 30, 35 years ago, and they still don't have enough space for parking.
No, of course they don't. I was very, very lucky a few years back because my immediate next door neighbor with whom I share a drive couldn't drive. So I was able to use her side of the driveway. And then my neighbor to the other side of me went away to hospital for a bit. And he said, look, while I'm away, feel free to use the drive because it'll make the place look like it's still occupied so people don't, break in, basically. So I used his driveway and I was just putting cars on, just rotating him, and it was very, very handy. And I remember really awkwardly, I had my supercharged M3 at the time, and I used to park that on his drive. And I came back and there was like about another 3 cars on his driveway, and I thought, oh great, yeah, Tony's back from the hospital. I'm on his driveway, like, and the family must think like, God, who on earth dumped their car on his driveway? How rude. So I went and knocked on the door, and I was like, "Oh, hello, yeah, I'm James. I'm the next door neighbour. I see, obviously you're back with Tony. That's great. That's my car. He did say to leave it there, so I just didn't want to disturb. Like, but do you want me to move it? Like, how's he doing? Is he all right? They're like, he's dead.
Oh God.
And I was like, oh, and I was all there jolly and happy and everything, and I didn't know they'd come to clear his house. I had no idea, absolutely no idea. And I'm like, I'll come back for the car. Yeah, it was like, oh no, like, I'll go next door and just crawl into a ball, and it's like, oh dear.
Yeah.
All right, Ant, save us, please. Get us back on track. Grab some Top Trumps cards. Give me some inspiration.
I stumbled across my Top Gear Top Trumps cards from many years ago, or probably Damani's, to be honest. And I thought we'll go through a few of the cars on here and see, what do you remember about what was said about them, or what do you just generally think of the car? So the first car that we have is a Koenigsegg CCX. So I'll hand that around. You can remind yourself of it.
I'm sorry. Price, £420,000. Yeah, not anymore.
Not anymore.
Nope, yeah,
millions.
there you go. Well,
Ooh.
that's a very cool car. I do have a thing for a Koenigsegg.
Koenigsegg,
Yeah.
as they put on the leaderboard.
Well, I remember, I think what everybody else does, which is that the Stig crashed either that or a Koenigsegg.
Yeah, it was.
I think
it was a CCX, but it was later.
It was because it says there on the actual the Top Trump facts, it was the spoiler. It didn't have. They put a spoiler on it, and then it didn't try to kill him.
Yeah, after which it became the fastest ever car on the track, and something set a new lap record, didn't it, the other day?
Ah, yes, it was the McMurtry Spearling, which also did another record the other day. But you're looking confused.
I don't even know what that vehicle is.
So it's a British engineering company had this wild and crazy idea of saying, look, if you just threw everything out of the window that we know about cars, and you were to build an EV that was designed mainly for the track, what would it be like? And they built this thing which looks like a mini Batmobile.
You know the Michael Keaton Batmobile?
Yes.
Yeah, imagine like a Hot Wheels version of that.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it's tiny. I mean, honestly, it's like, it's a bit bigger than the sofa probably. Like, it's miniature, isn't it?
It is very small. It is very small. It seats one person in a central seating position, and it's very tight in the cockpit. I'd love to have a go in it. And it's an EV, but it uses fans to create downforce. It can generate 2,000 kilograms of downforce while stationary.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So it literally, and it sounds like a jet. Like, it just sounds like a jet engine when it's running. And because of that, it basically corners faster than an F1 car. 0 to 60 is like 1.4 seconds or something like that. And its top speed on the prototype was, I think, 150 miles an hour. They limited it because, while they were developing it. But the new version, the one that is available to customers, the Pure, that is £1 million to buy one. But apparently it has a top speed of around 200 miles an hour.
Well, I'll have to look into that. That sounds interesting.
Yep. And they blew past a record that had sat with the Top Gear track since, I think it was the 2000s, early 2000s, which was set by a Renault Formula One car. And they beat it by 4 seconds.
Wow.
3 seconds, wasn't it? But either way, that's blooming impressive.
That is when the track, the average lap times are about a minute or something on that track. That is, that's not insignificant.
It did it in a 55 point something seconds. And actually, the other thing that they did recently was to demonstrate that it is genuinely generating this downforce. They rigged up this rig, I don't know how else to call it, that they could drive onto, that they could rotate it around 180 degrees, in the horizontal.
Like a fairground ride.
Yeah. So they drove it onto this platform, they switched it on, and then they rotated it so it was upside down. They drove it forward a meter. So it is technically the first car ever to drive while upside down.
Wow.
Because everyone always says, with Formula One cars, it generates so much downforce, it could drive upside down. You're like, well, yes, it does at speed.
Yeah.
This can do it stationary. Although, have to give a mention, like many things, this is not a particularly original idea because Chaparral were doing this back in the 60s with, I think, the 2J and the various different cars. They all had two in them, I think. They had the fan car, which the original one looked very, very basic. It was just like a sort of, almost like someone put like a cereal box on its side and had a couple of it had a snowmobile engine in it, which just drove the fans. So you see it turn on. I think there's a big like Chevy engine for the forward momentum, but you see it when the fans kick in, the thing just goes to the floor. That very quickly got banned because again it could generate cornering speeds that particularly for the time were obscene because unlike everything else with aerodynamics on, which was quite experimental at the time, the speed of the car wasn't required to generate the downforce. Whereas obviously your traditional, wings and things need speed to work. These didn't.
The reason why they got banned was on safety grounds because they need a skirt to seal the underfloor. Whereas today, ground effect uses aerodynamics where they create a vortex to seal the underfloor. Back then, they didn't know about that stuff yet. So they actually had a physical seal. It turns out that the Mercury Speeding has the same. So it doesn't have to rely on speed. But they had a skirt on the side. And what would happen is if the surface was uneven, they'd sort of knock the skirt up.
Yep.
That would break the seal and suddenly the car would become unstable and snap. So it was actually quite dangerous in a racing setting. But McMurtry seemed to have addressed a lot of that in terms of how they've engineered it.
I'm going to look into that later. That sounds really quite interesting.
Yeah, honestly, it's like fantastic British engineering.
And it's nice to see a bit of British engineering in kind of the motorsport kind of area, isn't it? A lot of people seem to think that the British car industry is completely dead, but not quite so.
Well, mass manufacturing is, we still do lots of it, but in terms of motorsport, Britain is the centre of the world.
Oh, yeah. Before we move off the McMurtry, I want to just say I hope they can get to the point where they can create cars that, EVs that are exciting, because clearly the Spearling is very exciting.
Yeah.
But also interesting as road cars. Maybe a supercar EV that isn't £1 million would be lovely at some point.
I think it's worth saying that most of us don't actually have a problem with EV as a technology in itself here. Between the three of us, we don't mind it. It's just when they're implemented poorly and are boring.
I maintain to this day that the reason that the vast majority of people that I know dislike the vast majority of EVs that they drive is not because they're EVs, it's because they are modern cars and they suffer all of the same issues.
Yes.
Like the BMW that I just returned is an i4, and actually there's a huge amount about it that's really, really good. What did I not like about it? The styling. That's not because it's an EV. I didn't like the amount of menus I have to go through to turn stuff off. That's not because it's an EV. That's legislated. I didn't like the fact it doesn't really make much noise. That is partly because it's an EV. But if it wasn't an EV, it wouldn't be allowed to make much noise anyway. There's a whole bunch of stuff I don't like about modern cars. The electric bit doesn't really enter into it.
Yeah.
Right, I've got another car for you, James.
Oh, the noble M15, one of the greatest cars to never happen. Which actually, so I am a very, very lucky devil. I got to drive the noble M600, courtesy of a lovely chap called James, last year, maybe the year before. And the M600, as far as I can tell, is effectively the M15's chassis, but with a completely different engine in the back. That would have had, I think, one of the Ford Duratec lumps in it.
Yeah, 3.5.
Then this had the Volvo-derived V8. So actually getting to drive the M600, I wasn't really so much excited about driving the M600, which in fact was the very car driven on Top Gear.
Ooh.
Wow.
I have driven at least one Top Gear featured car. No, two. You've driven one.
Yes.
And you're going to drive it.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So we've got coming from Audi the Heritage Fleet R8, which was not just on Top Gear, it was in the Top Gear opening sequence for a few years. OY07, I think, is how the reg starts. A Daytona Grey first gen R8 V8, which is quite a cool thing.
I'm excited
You,
about
my
that.
friend, are getting to drive an actual Top Gear car.
I know. Well, it's not the first one I will have been in, though. My friend Barney, he had the Renault Megane 225, I think it was, that they did against the BMW M130i or whatever it was back in the day.
Yeah.
Possibly a Golf GTI.
Yeah.
I think they did something like that. But yeah, he owned that car for a while, actually. I did email you once, this for your friends, and tried to sell it to you because he only sold it for about 4 or 5 grand. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was quite a good little car.
It's just not the right car for me, regardless of its Top Gear appearance. Although, frustratingly, I don't think it's road legal, but Kia own the reasonably priced Seed.
Wow, that's very cool. Oh, I'd love to have a go in that.
Yeah,
just
me
for a
too.
laugh.
Maybe I can ask them to borrow it for a track day.
Oh, let's do that.
Yeah,
honestly, if we do that plan that we had about using the track for 2 days and doing some filming, that could be something.
All right, I'll speak with Kia.
But something about the Noble M15. You know what it reminds me of? Do you remember the Farbood?
Yeah.
Then it was sold to Ginetta. That was it.
Okay, and there's another car, I'm sure, which is basically a Noble, but they sold it in the States. I can't remember the blooming name of it now. Comment section, help us out. But yeah, it is just a Noble with a different badge on it, basically.
Yeah, I remember I was at the TVR Centre in Barnet, or there or thereabouts, North London somewhere, one day. My son and I were driving. He was very young at the time. I think I just got the 370Z, so this would have been around 2009. And I was driving down this road that I had never had the need to drive down before, and I saw this sign saying TVR Centre. I drove down there. Then it had a sign saying car wash, and I was like, what? And it turned out that they had like a full-time, car washer at this, because it was a dealership as well as a service centre. And you could just, chuck him a tenner and he'd like do a proper showroom clean on your car, which was quite nice.
Yeah.
And obviously in 2009, a tenner was more than it is now.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I went down there and we ended up looking around, and then this Farbood just pulls up, and I was like, what? I've literally only read about these cars. I'd never seen one. It turned out that it was the owner of the TVR Centre at the time, that he was just popping by on his way back from work. And I was like, Turns out he was a dentist. And he had the TVR Centre and owned it for some years, and because he was just a huge TVR fan, generally British sports car fan. But I don't know if they're there anymore.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
You do always find it's dentists that own the weirdest things.
Yeah.
There was also a dentist that set up JD Classics, but the less said about that, the better.
Yeah, let's not go there. I do have a funny story about this, though. And as I was about to leave, I was saying something to the guys, and we were just chatting cars. Damani was there. And they said something like, oh, I don't know, given that you're driving the Z, I'm not sure if you'd be able to handle the Farbood. And I'm not a bad driver. Anyway, as I was pulling away, it's on a quite steep hill. I managed to stall the car literally seconds later.
I bet they were laughing.
Yeah, we all had a laugh about it.
Classic. Cars like to do this.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Right, gentlemen. The specials.
Oh, yeah. Here we go.
We've got to talk about the specials.
Before we go on to the Top Gear specials particularly, I got these for 50 pence each at a charity shop. And one of them sealed, one of the Jeremy Clarkson's kind of home DVD movie things.
These are important things. So we've got in our hands here Heaven and Hell, Clarkson's Duel, new for 2009, and The Italian Job, which... You know what? These are... I don't tend to really remember these so much. I've watched all of them, but maybe I need to rewatch them.
Well, I've got them.
But yeah, there you go. And I've even got a DVD player as well. How quaint of me.
I know.
But it's actually the Clarkson Christmas special VHS tapes, which is where new Top Gear began. He did one, which is often forgotten, called Motorsport Mayhem, which is actually a bit rubbish. It's just clips of stuff happening on tracks and then played again in slow motion to pad it out to the required 50-odd minutes. But the second one is, I think, one of maybe the most influential pieces of automotive journalism ever made, and that's Clarkson Unleashed on Cars, which has been referenced in a couple of videos I've recorded recently. That's the one in which he declares the 355 the greatest car in the history of the world ever, and I've driven the 355. He also declares the worst car in the history of the world ever, the Nissan Sunny. And I got to drive a Sunny the other day. I actually quite liked it. He
So
also,
not the worst car ever then.
no, but he said it for basically the same reason as they later deemed the Lexus SC430 in another one of the specials with Richard Hammond. I think it might be was it one of the Perfect Road Trips or something? I can't remember. Basically, in that it's not actually a bad car. It's just so thoroughly and completely average in every conceivable way that it's just got not a single redeeming feature about it, nor really, I think, any character. You know,
Isn't that the point of the Sunny?
I remember they did a feature on old Top Gear of the Toyota Corolla, I think, and it was just basically saying it's like a fridge. You can get it in white and it looks like a fridge.
what was it? Was it? I'm trying to think now. Was it the Cavalier or the Vectra where Clarkson did the review and didn't drive it? It's a legendary piece of journalism, and it was scathing. And it's one of these pieces where the company went absolutely ape, because basically he looked at it and was like, this apparently is a new car, and yet they don't seem to have bothered doing anything about it. Ergo, I'm not going to bother driving it.
He wasn't very nice to the Mark IV Astra either, was he? I remember he did a video on that where he was, making a fake phone call with the producer and saying, "Oh, I don't want to drive it. Like, do I have to drive it?" Kind of things like that. Don't make me drive it. And then he drive it, and he's just sitting there going, in his typical face, going, "Ugh, dreary rubbish."
The only thing with Clarkson reviews is that you work out, especially by the time the Clarkson Hammond May Top Gear comes around, is that effectively, if he starts the review hating the car, he loves it. If he starts the review loving the car, he hates it. Like, it actually, you work out, it's actually quite formulaic. All generally very, very well written by, Richard Porter and many, many other people like that.
Tom Ford as well.
Yeah,
wrote a lot of episodes.
There you go. So, people forget that it's not just them doing their own thing. There's a big creative team behind it. But those DVDs and things, so yeah, they had in Unleashed, you have the famous drag race between a bunch of cars, which a suspiciously speedy TVR Cerberus walks away with. They launch a car from a trebuchet. I think that might have been the Sunny, actually. Then in the next one, they have Apocalypse Clarkson, and then it goes on from there. But those which were a bit more outlandish, had a bit more destruction and things in them, were a little bit more silly. They kind of set a lot of the template for Top Gear. Although, having again rewatched some of those early episodes recently, does make me a little bit upset what you were able to get for so little 20 years ago. Even sodding it, like, even taking into account inflation, etc., etc., etc.
Do you remember when they Clarkson, one of his specials, destroyed an air-cooled 911?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be worth quite a lot of money now.
Yeah, that one not masses, but certainly a hell of a lot more than it was then.
Yeah.
He did not like the 911.
No.
As you were mentioning about the writing, actually, did I ever tell the story about Damani and I had lunch with Tom Ford and Johnny Smith when we were filming a show with them, and Damani was the guest, I was just the chauffeur and the manager at the time, and everyone's got their own style of like how they talk, but then how they present. And, Tom Ford has his own way of presenting. So when we sat down and were having lunch and was just having like a more normal conversation, him just being himself, the way he was talking just sounded so very sort of like this blend of Clarkson, Hammond and May. And I was like listening to him, and he was telling this whole story, and it was just hilarious. Like, we were all laughing our heads off. And then I was like, I'm sorry to say this, but that just sounded so Top Gear. He says, well, yeah, because I wrote most of what they said in most episodes. And I was like, I didn't appreciate how much the writing was in that style. And it wasn't until a while later I went back and watched one of those Clarkson videos, and you realize that Clarkson, without that writing and without the dynamic of Hammond and May, he's very different. In fact, sometimes it's just borderline boring.
Yeah, or the issue I think that the Grand Tour had was that when they worked for the BBC, and I think May certainly has gone on record of saying this, like, they had lots and lots of limitations and restrictions and things they couldn't do. And restriction is a great thing for creativity. It's created so much amazing stuff, having something you can't do or whatever, or a way you need to get around a certain problem. Also, I think, as was evidenced by particularly the later seasons and some of the Grand Tour, a lot of it just descended into puerile stuff.
Yeah.
Now, whether it got worse or whether maybe I grew up or maybe a combination of the two.
I think it's a combination.
I do watch some of the later stuff now, and I watch it and go, oh, really? I mean, like, I was 13 at the time, so I found it funny, but you were 40. Like, come on, man, have some self-respect here,
I mean, they haven't been without their controversial slip-ups, shall we say, over the years.
Yeah.
Mostly Clarkson, of course, let's be honest.
Yeah, mostly.
I mean, look, none of us are perfect, but one of the best parts about having, the job that we do is that we could say something utterly and totally outrageous, and then we can censor it.
Just
You how dare you? You talk to your mother with that mouth.
But even with the YouTube editor, you can just snip little bits out as well.
exactly.
Yeah. So, although, side diversion, I tell you what, anybody that's not seen it, I really wish there were more than 2 of these, but there are just the 2. You can find them on YouTube now. Jeremy Clarkson did 2 military documentaries. One about the greatest raid of all, and one about the Victoria Cross. And they are 2 of the best pieces of television you will ever watch. And it is very, very clear that he was passionate about this, treated the subject with respect and dignity and the gravity that it deserved, but also still managed to tell the story in an engaging and interesting way. And one day I would love to be able to do something along those lines as well, because it's also a bit of a passion of mine. And it's just a shame that there were only 2 of these things, because I think he could have done a whole series on it, as opposed to being pigeonholed by the car stuff, doing Clarkson's car years and all that sort of stuff, which is another one of those little shows where people think it was Top Gear, and it wasn't. James May did Cars of the People, which is also a really, really good series. And Richard Hammond. Now, again, maybe a generation thing, but I'm gonna get locked eyes with Will now, and I'm gonna say something. And we're gonna have a moment, right? Brainiac. Do you ever watch Brainiac?
What's that?
That answers that question. Brainiac, or to give it its full title, Brainiac Science Abuse, was an amazing show, I think on, just conveniently enough for when you get home from school,
Yeah.
that would have played in the mid to late noughties, I'm going to call it.
Yes.
And effectively, it was lots and lots of different segments. I remember, was it John Tickle, the things that make you go,
Yes.
yeah. Lots of different sciencey questions and stuff. So they did, for example, can you run on custard? Because everyone talks about custard as, I can't remember the exact scientific term, but it is technically a liquid, but when a force or a shock is applied to it, it basically solidifies. So the people always said, technically you could run on custard because the force of your foot on it makes it temporarily turn into a solid.
Did people actually try and run on custard?
Yes. They made basically a swimming pool full of, and it's like custard you probably wouldn't want to eat to make the thing work, but it was technically custard.
And I think it was actually at Richard Hammond's house as well.
It might have been, yeah.
I think it was.
So they did all sorts of stuff. The Can You Destroy Rock and Roll, where they basically just had like a ghetto blaster playing Twisted Sisters, You Can't Stop Rock and Roll, and then just trying to like run it over with a van, stuff like that. And there was a very, very easy on the eyes professor, I seem to recall, who did lots of experiments with a bit of skin on display. But sensible. Like I'm not talking
Yes.
like your Babe Station type thing here. I'm talking
Not Katy Perry in Sesame Street.
It was very tasteful indeed. But as Kenny Everett once said. But yeah, he also did an amazing show on the gunpowder plot. Which have you seen that?
No, I don't think I did.
no,
Was
so
that
this-
when they blew up the one to blow up Parliament or something?
Yeah.
Like
So
that,
basically, they wanted to ask the question: had the gunpowder plot actually gone through, had they managed to light the torch, as it were, would it have worked? would it have actually destroyed the Houses of Parliament? If so, what would the damage have been? So again, it's one of these great things. It's on YouTube. You can see it. Where it's about an hour long or so, and they build a recreation of the Houses of Parliament, which it's one of these series where it's like, actually, you have to look into, I say series, it's one episode. You have to look into various different things, because they're like, well, the Houses of Parliament they were trying to blow up is not the Houses of Parliament that you think of. How was it constructed? Where would the people have been standing? What exactly would they have been using for gunpowder? Does it vary with what we consider gunpowder today? How are they going to do it? How many barrels did they have? Where did they put the barrels? You know, how did they even get the damn things under there? Do you know how they got access to the space underneath the Houses of Parliament? They rented it. Yeah. Safety and security, not quite as it is today. And basically the conclusion of the show is they then light this thing and stand back, and I'll not spoil it, but it's worth watching.
Well, I think if people want to see James doing some history stuff and letting his inner history nerd kind of flourish, let us know in the comments section below, or send us an email at landlord@radiatorarms.com.
Yeah, we got an email there the other day.
We had an email.
An entire one.
What did it say?
I will dig it out of my pocket. Meanwhile, do you want to distract us with another top trump?
I was actually going to mention on the history front, during James's trip down to Andorra, while he was driving down there, he did mention the topic of maybe covering a little bit of history. There was a particular town that had a particularly sad story that he drove past or near, and decided to stop briefly for. But yeah, I can imagine you doing a really good job of presenting some history.
I would really like to, because what I want to do one year is do a little like World War II centric tour of Europe, taking in a little bit of a mixture of some driving stuff, some sights and scenes, and also bit of war-related history. The village you're talking about is Oradour-sur-Glane, which is one of these places that basically one day it was a village full of people, and the next day everybody was gone, and the French kept it as it is, as a monument to what can happen when history goes wrong. Okay, so
when you let a nation commit genocide.
Yeah. Basically. This email is from a chap called Jacob, and he says it's addressed to hello James and Will brackets or whoever reads this. Bless you, Jacob, for thinking we can afford staff. It says, hope you had a good weekend and the start of the week is going well for you. Yeah, it's going all right for me. And how's it for you?
Yeah, it's been pretty okay apart from my back.
I would like to suggest a subject idea. The car companies which have had the highest highs and the lowest lows.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good one. I might have to use that one. And which cars would fill those slots? It might just result in a discussion about Maserati, which I think has got to be a contender, hasn't it? The highest highs and lowest lows, and sadly not in very even proportion.
Here's one.
Oh, yeah, MC12, Versione Corsa. I think it would also be great to hear about some of the moments that sparked your love for cars. Maybe it was the time your dad brought home a Ford Capri GT. I remember when my dad brought home a Ford Capri. I was very confused. Or even if you saw a Ferrari parked outside your school for the first time. Actually, embarrassingly, I think the first time I saw a Ferrari parked outside of school would have been when Dad parked his Ferrari outside school, and two of the lads had an argument as to whether it was a Ferrari or indeed a Porsche. I would love to hear what you made you guys love cars. Best of wishes to the trio from Scotland. Good luck from Jacob.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thanks, Jacob.
Yeah, I think we'll do that. How about we plan to cover that topic?
Yeah, we'll plot.
Yes.
And we'll cover that one for you soon, Jacob. So yeah, what else you got in the pile there?
I did want to just briefly mention the MC12. I mean, this one's the Versione Corsa, but this is a car. I know it's basically an Enzo, but better, according to many people. I actually got to sort of see one of these up close and personal. It was in one of these very expensive dealerships that have 250 GTOs lying around and the like. But yeah, it was seeing it in person, I think really made me appreciate how unbelievably long the back end of that car is.
They're enormous.
It's huge. It's just crazy. I thought I don't know. I thought I knew what long tail meant, but
no. I you know what? MC12 does nothing for me.
Really? Oh man, I used to drive them all the time in various games over the years.
Yeah, right. shall we try and talk about the specials?
Yes, specials. We were almost there.
About to say, we are currently just over an hour in, so we might finally get on topic properly now.
we have been on topic.
We have.
The whole
have,
time. We had a few little digressions. Listen, you just carry on doing your job. I'll decide when we're on track and when we're off track.
I'll sit here and just listen through the headphones and be quiet.
No, you can speak. Just my job is to keep us on track. Your job is to keep us recorded.
We need to get
Sorry,
like
Papa Ant.
we need to get like a traffic light system where you can just like a little yellow card for like, all right, okay, we'll get back and see it, and then just like maybe like a sort of referee's whistle just for...
I have actually got a plan for that. My brother gave me some suggestions, and it was my intention to place an order upon Amazon, but I haven't got around to it yet, but I will.
Wasn't a cane, was it?
No, you'd have to pay extra for that.
Oh, crikey.
Quiet
Moving
boy.
forward.
Yes. All right. So I think actually I love the specials, right? But I don't think enough credit is sometimes given to what I would call maybe the mini specials, the sort of, they're just features really. Like I rewatched recently, they did the £100 car special. Can you remember that when you could actually get a car?
I also rewatched that in preparation for this as well.
Yeah.
That actually drives.
Yeah. And back then could have some tax on it as well.
Yeah.
My mate, he used to basically buy a car for between £200 and £350 and drive it until it was scrap and then just buy another car. He spent less on motoring he spent less on his car in a single year than I spent on my insurance. And literally he'd buy it, and as long as it lasted him a few months, he was happy. He'd just buy another one and just scrap it. But most of the time, these cars would last him a year, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 years. Like he managed to have like 3 years of motoring once. I can't remember what car it was, but his total costs over the course of those few years was just hundreds of pounds. It was less than £1,000 insurance. I mean, these are small, inexpensive cars, but
that was the magic, wasn't it? You want to buy a car which has got near as damn it 12 months of a ticket on it for MOT, and preferably a bit of tax as well. And then you're like, anything that's got that, you're like, I'll pay a few hundred quid for that. All right, gentlemen, what is the least you've paid for a car then, in the vein of this episode?
240 quid.
For a
Peugeot 106 1.1 Zest 2 in Woodland Green.
MOT'd?
Yes, it had at least 6 months, and it was just before the tax swap over, so it actually had 6 months on it.
Blooming heck, that's pretty. So you got basically like a car for 150 quid or so, probably. Yeah. Wow. That's not bad. Right. And
£7,500.
That's the least you spent on it.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever spent that much on a car.
Well, see, what happened was, I didn't, because obviously I lived in London, right? So you didn't need a car to get around. So I just didn't own a car until eventually, after I'd been working in this job for I got the job. That was it. I got the job, and but I had to get there was a nightmare. I had the job for a few months. I managed to work in a London office for a bit, and then they wanted me to work in Hemel Hempstead. And to get to Hemel Hempstead by public transport would mean going into London and coming back out of London again, which would have taken like 2 hours or something ridiculous. So I had to get a car. And I happened to be walking past this dealership, and that's when I saw the Mondeo 2-litre SI. Again, this was 1996, I think it was. So, £7,500 was quite a lot. But also the car was only about like, I think 2 years old or 18 months. It wasn't very old at all. And so I couldn't afford a car at all for years. Took the bus and the train for years. And then eventually when I could afford a car, luckily when I needed a car, I could afford to buy a half decent one. Subject to your opinion about the Mondeo.
Actually, I've realised I've lied to you. The cheapest car I ever bought was £100, but it didn't have a front end on it and it had been crashed into a wall.
Right.
So that one doesn't really count because it wasn't running and driving.
Yeah.
But
No. I'm going to have to live up to the Clarkson stereotype here. I got a Toyota Previa for free. I bought a business, and the business involved doing cheap car trips and things, and I got gifted by the previous owner a Toyota Previa, which didn't have an MOT on it, did require one, and I think it needed about £100 of work to get it through said MOT. But that car, which then wound up being retired in Romania, would have gone on for quite some time. I do remember as we got towards our destination, because the idea with this trip was the cars were going one way and they were going to be donated to good causes on the other end. We were driving through this town and this chap was walking across the road, and I thought he was going to basically walk in front of us. And he slipped a bit and dropped this bucket he was carrying, which I didn't realize until it was too late, was full of white emulsion paint. So he fell, dropped this bucket. He fell away from the car. He was way, it wasn't like I run him over or anything like that. He stood there looking absolutely hilarious because he's now covered in white paint. And to ease his suffering, I had somewhere to be. I drove through the paint.
No.
And I didn't really realize. It all happened so quickly. He's basically stood on the side of the road, drops bucket, I go past, splash everywhere. And for the next 300 yards down the road, we were leaving this white tyre track. So sorry to that one village in Romania. I'm really sorry. That was us. If that doesn't count, because I got it as part of a business, I did also buy a Civic Sport, which had also no MOT, an obscene exhaust, and that was 400 quid. And I did also get, with Laurie and myself, we got an MG ZS 180 for £525 off eBay that did have an MOT, but definitely shouldn't have. So, yeah.
Back on the topic of specials, and you mentioned Romania. What about the Transfiguration Road?
Oh, yeah. I have actually known a couple of people that have done it, and they've said don't do it.
Really?
Yeah, they've said that bit that you see is really, really good and fun, and the police don't really care what you do as long as you don't kill yourself. But to get to it, the roads you have to traverse are less than optimal.
Oh, wow.
And they're like, you can probably get just as good elsewhere without the struggle of having to go there and deal with everything.
Although, need to find a way, though.
Yeah, I'm also tempted.
Right. There's one of the goals for the channel is for us to be able to do a special one day where we go to some of these places that many people will just have dreamed of. So that's one of our ambitions. Other specials included where they built ridiculous vehicles, and I'm thinking of the was it the Thrust
Eagle Thrust, which
Eagle
was
Thrust,
the I Thrust, was it
Hammerhead Eagle Thrust.
That was it. Wasn't that based on a TVR platform or something like that, or something? And then they put all the metal. Is this the electric one or?
Hang on, I thought this one. I don't know. I'll have to look it up.
Because
there's also the Rover James.
Yes,
the Rover James.
Yes.
Well, so I thought for a second, maybe I'm not remembering correctly. There was one that he made, which was, because I think this was the one. Apparently, it was versus the G-Wiz, and it was like this pod that he ended up in. And
Oh, you're thinking of the P45.
P45. That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah,
Yeah, when he's driving along and the lorries go past, and he's like, "Oh, lorry! Ooh, little bits of poo just came out."
One of, I think, my favourite moments of the entirety of Top Gear. Yeah, because the Hammerhead Eagle I Thrust.
No, that was
their
the
electric car.
yeah, that was it.
One of my favourite moments, because there's a lot of it where it's scripted and everything else. You can tell, and I don't bemoan them for that, but there are also moments where you can tell they are just having the time of their lives. And I think something that will stay with me forever is James May's laugh looking at Jeremy Clarkson's motorhome wobbling about the Citroen, like the Bristol Citroen, and May just falls apart in his Lotus XL, which I drove a Lotus XL the other day. Used to own one of those. Really cool car. You'd love it.
Really?
Yeah, they're
Sorry,
awesome.
you owned a Lotus XL?
Oh, yeah, I owned a
I
Lotus
didn't know
XL.
that.
Yeah,
Did
the early
it
days of
excel
Channel.
at being a good car?
It was brilliant, but unfortunately, it needed some things done to it, and the channel was not a money-making enterprise. In fact, it was a very much money-losing enterprise, and I just couldn't afford to. Stuff that these days would be like, yeah, I'll get that done, it's no problem. But back then, I was like, this costs money, of which I have none. It's unfortunate, and sadly, that car's been off the road for about 6 years now. I wish I could get it back because it was a cool car and a lovely color combo, and yeah, just one of the best driver's cars ever made. Honestly, criminally underrated car. But yeah, that episode that did.
What were the other cars on that? And what was it? What were the cars on that episode?
It's a Lotus XL, which had the pod on top of
Yep.
it, and the fuel filler flap that couldn't be accessed without a saw.
Yeah, that was
Then is it a Citroen CX? I think was it the Clarkson's one?
Was it
was
a BX?
No, definitely not BX. I'm sure it wasn't a BX. It was a Citroen of some sort because it had the hydro
Yeah.
pneumatic
Yes.
suspension, which you had to use to get it in the petrol station. And then Hammond was a Landy, wasn't it? The Landy with the
Yes.
basically a DIY. You know,
Oh yes, he
yeah.
had to put the whole house out like one of those.
Yeah.
Then he had to try and did he try and get changed on the beach or something? And he didn't have any of his panels because he'd left them all
Yes.
at the thing. So everybody was watching him get changed.
And
Oh, there was an issue with the toilet as well.
yeah,
really.
there was. They also did easy to confuse the two. They also did a caravanning special, I think, before that, which I rewatched recently, where stuff just goes wrong. I mean, to be honest, I didn't generally enjoy much of the wanton destruction on Top Gear unless it included caravans, in which case I'm all for it.
Caravanism is a thing.
Yeah, it is a blight upon society.
Wasn't it a lot of Austin Allegros they killed? Was it Allegros they dropped pianos on?
Yeah.
There was a few different things they
Or was it
did.
Morris Marinas?
Morris Marinas, yeah, and the Morris Marina Owners Club wrote a letter, apparently.
Yes.
Allegedly. I mean, a lot of the letters were just made up, we know, but... they wrote a letter of complaint, apparently, because obviously they were destroying all these Morris Marinas.
Yeah. Not miners. I think they might actually like those.
Marinas, yeah. What blew me away is that there's a Morris Marina Owners Club in the first place, but...
Listen, there's an Austin Maestro Owners Club, so there can be a Morris Marinas Owners Club.
Yeah, but my
You say owners club, I say support group.
group therapy on the weekends.
Into that.
Fantastic. Oh, and one of the things that I am kind of like, I feel validated by, was one of the things that I learned from Top Gear was, basically, if you want to meet a woman and, attract her, what you do is you take her to the Sainsbury's car park and you do handbrake turns. And for years, I thought, no, that can't be true. And then I saw Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, where he literally did that. He does like a handbrake turn and drifts around this ladies in a car and he gets their phone numbers. So I feel validated in the end that, that is a real thing. I mean, it appeared in at least 2 fictional settings.
Meanwhile, I did a handbrake turn once with my wife in the car and she threatened to divorce me. So
I don't know. See, that's the thing. You got to do it before you get together. That gets you together. But once you're together, then you have to stay together. And that's when you can't do the handbrake turns. You know why? Because if you do the handbrake turns, imagine all the women who will be flocking to you, and then she'll get jealous, and then she'll be worried that you'll be stolen away.
I don't think she'll ever have to worry about women flocking to me, bless her.
That's because you're not doing handbrake turns. That's I'm just saying.
Yeah. And trust the cable on the Golf. I remember once when I was still living with my mum, there was a big car park out the back of our house. And there's these young lads there making an awful racket. And I looked out the window and be like, what the hell are they doing? And they were trying to drift.
Oh dear.
In their front wheel drive hatchbacks. And it's like, they're going to be quite some time, Like,
Did they have
McDonald's trays?
McDonald's trays on?
no, this was before the trend. They didn't even have those. And it's like,
they sell those now. Like you can buy them online, drift trays.
yeah.
It's crazy. You can actually buy them.
And the amount of cars I've seen where people doing that, then suddenly flip and are on their roof as well.
Never seen it. I've never been in that type of environment. I've stayed away.
Oh, no. So all online, usually on some Instagram reel, here's a car flipping over the McDonald's trays.
I have seen a Reliant Robin go onto its side. It is more difficult than Top Gear made out because they deliberately weighted the car to get it to roll over. But it can be done. On one of the many trips I did with my dad and his friends, someone rolled the Aston Robin, basically put it on its side. Basically, the conversation went like this. These are actually harder to roll than you think, aren't they? Yes, they are. See, look at this. 30 seconds later, it's on its side.
Brilliant. That's a bit like my I'm not a bad driver story.
Yeah. Now, I think officially speaking, because I did a quiz recently and Top Gear was a segment on it, the first, what they called special, was the Polar Special. But I don't think, or maybe the Winter Olympics special. There's a couple of those which are sort of don't kind of really count. Then the first proper one, I believe, was Botswana, wasn't it? Was it when they crossed the desert?
Yeah.
Because they then revisited it in the final Grand Tour. Although, one of my absolute favourites has to be the Africa special. And I love it. I think it's maybe my favourite selection of cars because they had estates, didn't they? Hammond had the Subaru with the exhaust that heralded the imminent arrival of a moron. Clarkson had, I think, was it a 528?
Yeah, 528 E39.
Yeah. And then May had the Volvo 850R, which is pretty hardcore. But my favourite moment is, if you recall, Clarkson had to make himself a handbrake, which is just a log on a string, and then put it through his own back window. And that was definitely an unscripted moment. I absolutely loved that. Which of the special cars would you guys have if you could?
Oh,
I don't remember them, to be honest.
That's really, really hard. There's so many of them. I did always quite like that BMW, the one we were literally talking about. Because I just love E39s and I love estates and I love a touring. And I love the way he fixed it with a hammer as well.
Yeah. I could see you in an 850R, N.
Yeah.
Do you even know what an 850R is?
I don't know.
You ever owned an estate? Or have you never been that uncool?
Never.
Do you remember when Volvo went touring car racing with an estate?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the 850R was the road-going version of that car. So, like, lower, lighter, stiff... Actually, it probably wasn't lighter. Lower, stiffer, bigger alloys, completely unsuited to desert traversal.
Didn't that whole thing happen because they didn't have any spare chassis? So the only one they could get their hands on was a estate. So they said, all right, we'll build it anyway.
It's one of those things where I've heard a whole bunch of different stories, some of which are probably true. Maybe it's one of those things where a bit of every story is true. I've not actually heard that one before. I have heard that it was basically their first outing in touring cars. They knew they weren't going to win, but by doing this, they could get more screen time because it was just so weird.
Yeah.
I also heard the story that the estate was somehow more rigid than the saloon. I'm not entirely sure how I believe that, but I did watch a piece recently talking about these cars, and they said to try and keep the damn thing competitive, because I think it was heavier than all the competition, the work TWR were doing to the engines was absolutely insane. Like the level of
innovative
engineering
as well. Very clever stuff.
Yeah, it was
I watched a video on that. Something to do with the angle of the something ports or something. They ended up changing. I can't remember.
Oh, they did all sorts.
Yeah,
all sorts.
I got a topic on the Top Gear thing, not necessarily to wrap up with, but certainly to cover briefly. Some Top Gear tragedies, and I had to just remind myself of the name of the car that I thought had a bit of a tragic end, and that was the Mazda Furai.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
The concept car.
Yep, and it was based on a GT1 car or something, if I'm not mistaken, or a Le Mans car of some description.
Was that one that burnt down on the track or something?
Yeah, it came to a fiery end on the track. It was some issue, I don't know, fueling issue or something that happened, and yeah,
It's a cool car.
oh, it's one of the coolest cars I've ever seen.
Don't forget the jet fuel dragster, whatever it was, that put Hammond in a hospital.
The Vampire.
The Vampire, that was it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and the Caparo T1.
Yep,
Do you remember that?
I do.
Wow, that caught fire as well.
What was that? Because that has completely skipped my mind.
So it was a bunch of ex-McLaren engineers, if I'm not mistaken, got together and said, "Hey, we can make the ultimate road legal track car," and it was basically like an F1 car but with wheel arches, and I think it had a tandem, like some weird offset 2-seat layout, but it was basically like an open wheel Formula car that wasn't open wheel anymore, but it looked cool. When I saw one in person, I was like, I want to have a go in that.
So, fun fact for you. A friend of a mate of a chap that I once knew, I met in a bar's cousin's wife, his best friend, once told me.
Right, I know them.
Yeah. The Caparo company technically still exists. I think probably with 0 employees and yada, yada, yada. It was bought for somebody as a wedding gift.
No.
Huh.
I only found this out because I was at a dealership and I saw one in there, and I'm reasonably certain the car is still there because nobody bought it. Because it was one of these cars where basically if you were an F1 driver, you could go very fast in it. If you weren't an F1 driver, you're going to kill yourself in it, because the problem with aero cars is that you have to go fast in them beyond a point that you feel is reasonable, and then the aero works. If you go fast, you get around the corner. You go slow, you won't. It's weird. It just doesn't work how you think it will.
Wasn't that another Top Gear thing? Didn't Richard Hammond go out in some F1 cars or something like that? And the same thing kind of happened. He wasn't giving it enough beans, and he kept spinning the cars. They had to keep bringing it back and restarting the engine and heating the tyres back up.
Yeah, because he wasn't going round the corners fast enough for the aero to work. And there's this weird bit in the middle where you kind of the grip's falling away, and then it comes back, and you've got to go over that. You've got to go past that speed where that constant.
Where your brain tells you the chassis had enough, which in a car without aero, the car has had enough, but effectively,
you've got to way past that.
Yeah. It's one of these things that just, and this is also, again, like I was saying earlier, one of the reasons that a lot of aerodynamic devices and things got banned in the 60s is because they were quite unreliable, particularly the really high-mounted wings. So you remember the Formula One cars with wings on like 4-foot high, poles, because they had this notion that for it to work, it had to be in clean air, which is kind of true. But they didn't fully understand what they were doing, and it was all a little bit iffy. And there were cases where basically, the thing actually did work, and it worked better than they thought. And what happened was basically the wing snapped off. So you'd be going through a bend, your wing falls off, and all of a sudden, you got no downforce over one half the car anymore. So you crash.
It's one of the reasons they put a wing on the Audi TT, wasn't it? Do you remember? Because they
stability.
And they ended up on certain circumstances going wee.
90, was it about around 90 miles an hour or 90 kilometers an hour? I forget now. Basically, it would have generated so much lift that the back end went light and people were crashing and dying in them. Didn't you have someone on your channel?
I featured an original
without the
non-wing.
It was voluntary. You could volunteer to bring it back in for a no costs.
Yeah, they changed the suspension. They put the little wing on. I think it was also part of the way that the car was designed, the aerodynamics. I think the wing is not really there to sort of generate downforce. The wing is there basically just to break the airflow and just basically stop it from creating as much lift as it did.
That's true of most road cars. Most road cars generate ever-increasing amounts of lift. There's very few road cars that actually have downforce. Supercars generally will have downforce.
I was going to say, if you've driven a road car at some form of speed, I'm talking about a maximum of 70 miles an hour here, of course.
No, you could be on a track.
Or you could be on a track.
Or autobahn.
Exactly. You notice on a lot of cars how the front end suddenly feels very light.
I'm of the opinion that anybody that tells you they can feel the downforce on a road car on the road is talking utter tripe. I do not know of a car that other than your McMurtry that generates enough downforce that you'd have so much of it at 70 that you'd actually notice it. Now, on the Autobahn, I've driven a few different cars, and you absolutely notice it. At 150, damn right, you can tell the difference between a car that's got lift is, neutral and has downforce. Like, it's abundantly clear. But yeah, 60, 70, I'm not buying it.
Especially when you're driving along and as you go past 150, you start to hear underneath the car. That wasn't happening before. You know that car is definitely heavier now.
Yep.
But look, I've got one more card.
Yep.
Right. This one, I know you know the answer to this, but let's just see. So do you have any idea how much a Pagani Zonda would be if you wanted to buy one today of any description?
Is it going to be millions?
Yeah.
Neither, but I know it's a lot of money. They're not as cheap as I don't think they're ever cheap though, were they?
Well, funny you should say that. Price of a Zonda F, back whenever this was in the early noughties, £335,000.
So this one for Jacob, one of my ultimate spots ever. This is from over 15 years ago. My mum was still living in Bury St Edmunds. I think I might have even still been living there, so it might have been earlier than that. I was walking back to hers, and through town drove a yellow Zonda F Roadster.
Oh.
A little while later, I actually met the son of the guy that owned it. His dad hadn't let him drive it. And he's a cool guy. He had a cigarist I took some photos of. And later I spoke to him and he said, "Oh, could you send me the photo of the cigar?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, here it is." And he said his dad had sold the Zonda. And I said, "Please tell me you got a go in it before he sold it." Nope.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was like,
Heartbreaking.
oh, man. Like, I've sat in a sum total of one Pagani. It's got a cool story attached to it, though. Would you like to hear it?
Go on then.
Yeah, go on.
All right.
That's what this podcast is all about.
All right. So, see, people listening at home, you look at the episodes and you think they're long. We barely even talked about blooming Top Gear, but I love this. We can come back. We have so much stuff. We
Do you know what?
Whole
Actually,
series.
I think we've talked a fair amount
More
about
than usual.
Top Gear.
More on topic than usual. Okay, so.
And anytime we've talked about any cards here, that's
Yeah.
technically Top Gear because it is Top Trump's Top Gear, cool
Yeah.
cars. So carry on.
I was in Miami, and there is a place over there called Prestige Imports, a very, very well-known car firm that deals with Lamborghinis. Also, put it this way, there was a Veyron just parked out the back. Okay.
As you do.
As you do, all casual like.
Oh, sorry, that reminds me of Motor World.
So basically, there was this huge, great big 6x6 thing out of there. Okay, so I was just trying to find the name of the two guys there. Okay, yeah. So, all right, I was in Miami on holiday with my mum. We'd gone to see the Daytona 500. The channel was very, very, very new at the time. So you can, and I made a video, so you can see this video. I might even find some clips of it. I had my Evora 400. In America, the Corvette C7 had just come out. Oof. But in Britain, I had my Evora, but I couldn't find anyone that had a Corvette. And I think I did find someone, but at the time, my insurance policy meant I couldn't drive the car. We then went on holiday to Miami. And of course, over there, Corvettes are everywhere. In fact, we hired one as our rental car. So I thought, I can now do a piece talking about my experience comparing this Corvette with the Evora. Problem is, where the hell in Florida do you find a Lotus Evora? Answer, Prestige Imports. Now, a lovely chap I got to meet called Mike Kimberley, who if we may not be able to, but if we can, I'd love to get as a guest on this. He was CEO of Lotus, worked there for decades, and also CEO of Lamborghini for 2 years. He had this really good relationship with these people that it run by a guy called Irv David. And they'd always been really, really good, always got on really well with Lotus and everything. They were just apparently really, really good guys. Irv had passed away some years before. Now, I got in touch and said, "Hey guys, here's me." It was a little nothing YouTuber, but name dropped Mike because I knew that Mike knew the father of the current owner. And what I would like to do is come down there and just park up my rental Corvette next to the Evora that you've got in stock, stand there, talk. That's it. They said, well, that's all you want to do? Yeah. No. Okay, when do you want to do it? I was like, well, I'm only here for another 5 or 6 days, so sometime this week. Come by on Thursday? Yeah, cool. All right. So I went down there. There were 3 Huayra bare carbons there, right? Wow. 3. Okay. So I do my piece. I go in there. I see the guy in there briefly. He's very, very busy. Speak to the secretary. She goes, yeah, cool. Head over there. We'll open the gate for you. Park up your Corvette. Do your piece. Cool. Do my piece. Film. I then am headed out, and I can see the guy, Brett is the son's name. His office door was open, and he wasn't on the phone or anything. So I thought, I have to do this. I have to go in and say, thank you very much for allowing me to come in and film. I really, really appreciate it. And he says, classic around, hey, yeah, no worries, man. Anything you can do, just let me know. Knowing probably that I'm about to get on a plane in 48 hours time, so there isn't really going to be anything else he can do. And I think, sometimes these opportunities present themselves to you, and you just got to ask, right? So I said, I have never sat in a Pagani in my life. Would you be able to fix that for me? And he says, yeah, of course. Pulls this key out of his desk, hands it to me, goes, there you go. It's the one at the front with the red wheels. Just take anything sharp out of your pockets. Have at it. All right. Okay. I've just been handed the keys to this $2.3 million Pagani.
Wow.
All right. Okay. So I go out there, I even took my wallet out of my pocket, everything, put it under the back of the car. Open the door. The key, by the way, is the most fascinating thing because it's like a metal sculpture of a Huayra, but buried inside it is a Mercedes key. Yeah. So like the end of a Mercedes key sticks out of it. So I open it. I'm sat inside this thing, and it's just this feast of carbon fiber and metal. It's just the most gorgeous thing you've ever seen. And this guy, this big guy, walks up looking at me, and I'm like, oh no. And he's like, you get the keys for this? I was like, yeah. Yeah, the guy gave it to me. He said it's okay for me to sit. And he's like, yeah. He's like, you started up for us? I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, he's basically complaining that there's some warning light on. Like, you just start it up, we need to see. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll start the car. So I got to sit in and start a Huayra. That's not the cool story.
Oh, hang on, wait. What?
Yeah, okay, right. So I then did a little bit of research, into this car. So it's called the Vulcan, right? It's bare carbon, red wheels and accents. You'd love it. It's the coolest car I think I've ever seen in my entire life. Right?
I think I've heard of it, yeah.
Now, the story of this car is that back in the 90s or so, Brett's father, Irv, basically said to his son, he took him to a motor show, Pagani was a new thing. He said, son, these guys are going to be the big thing. They're going to be huge, okay? And I want to be their dealer. But the Zonda was never federalized. The Zonda was never sold in the States, new. The Huayra, though, was. So when news came out that the Huayra was coming out and the Huayra was going to be federalized, Brett got in touch and said, hey, you're going to be selling this car in the States. I want to be your dealer. And they said, no, sorry, we've already done a deal. He said, no, I really, really want to be your dealership. This means a lot. And he said, we're really, really sorry. We've made a deal already. Like, it's done. So he goes, okay, I'm going to change tactic. When you buy a Pagani, you go to the factory. So he phones up and says, look, I want to buy a car. Okay, cool. All right, come out to the factory, spec your car and everything. So he goes out to the factory and goes there and everything and meets Mr. Pagani, Horatio. And he says, look, I'm going to be totally honest with you. I do have a bit of an ulterior motive for being here. I do want to buy a car. I will buy a car from you. But I also want to come here because I want to be your dealer in the United States. And Mr. Pagani says, look, I'm really, really sorry, but we've already done the deal. We've promised it to somebody else. He says, well, who have you promised it to? And he said, we promised it to a guy called Irv David. His dad had done a deal way back when with Pagani to be their dealer. And Pagani was honoring the deal, but didn't know that he died and didn't know that this was the son.
Wow.
So as soon as he was keeping his word, and he was saying, no, I've promised it to this other guy, not realizing the connection between the two of them. So as soon as they realized that that's what was happening, he's like, of course you can be the dealer. Like, that's what we were waiting for. And the car has a plaque in it dedicated to his dad.
Wow.
And that's the Vulcan.
That's the Vulcan.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
You know what? I think that is a great story for us to end on today.
I agree.
A bombshell.
A bombshell. Yes, on that bombshell.
Oh dear.
But I do think that there is so much more material to discuss around Top Gear. So we will come back to this in the future.
And this is why you need to email us at landlord@theradiatorarms.com.
Let us know when it's been too long and we'll bring the whole Top Gear topic back. Anyway, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's watching and listening. And make sure that if you are on YouTube right now, then if you haven't hit like or subscribe, please do so as soon as you possibly can. Because if you don't, well, you'll never be able to see us or hear us ever again. So do it now so you don't miss out. And we'll see you next time on the Radiator Arms.
Bye.
Bye bye.